Every game of Lorcana starts with the Mulligan phase, so understanding the nuances and how to best approach this part of the game is key to improving both your win rate and how much fun you have, because your games are going to go smoother if you understand how this works and how to best sort of optimize your decisions. And also, I want to make this video too because the Mulligan phase is maybe for newer players or people who haven't played so much TCGs before, can seem like a less important part, or it's just kind of before the game actually starts, so you don't have too much agency, or really it won't affect the game all that much. But if you really think about it, it's the chance where you can see a ton of cards. I mean, you can draw up to 7 more different cards than you start with. So it's super important to kind of understand how to think about this quickly and kind of give you some good rule of thumb to kind of approach this phase. But yeah, like I said, it's super important. So hopefully in this video I can just give you some thoughts on how to think about mulliganing better, or just and about Lorcana specifically, because it's definitely different than any other TCG that I've played, with the way the whole inking works and everything like that. So yeah, so to kind of get into it, I just want to I'll explain how mulliganing works in Lorcana if you're super new. And to start the game, you draw your 7-card hand, and you can put up to 0 or all 7 down and draw however many more to replace those cards. So you always start with a 7-card hand, but like I said, you get one chance to replace any cards you'd like. So in general, what I look for first off when I see my 7-card hand is, what are my first 3 turns look like? Your early game. Do you have, how many 1-drops, 2-drops, and 3-drops do you have? And that's the key. You gotta have an early game. If you have, say, all your late game, you're throwing a lot of cards. You're gonna put most, if not all, of those back and redraw. But if you have, a 1-drop and a 2-drop, and so you can start to look at the rest of your cards and say, are there any late game cards here that I want to keep? Any 6, 7, 8, 9 ink cost cards that maybe I want to keep because they are really, really good cards. Like if you're playing the Ruby Amethyst Control, and you might want to keep a 9-drop Maleficent in your hand, because that card is just crazy, especially to follow up. If say you have maybe a Be Prepared and that 9-drop Maleficent, you can say, hey, these 2 cards are really crazy in the late game, especially to kind of follow each other up, so maybe I'll keep those 2. But the only way you're going to want to think about keeping those 2 is if you have both an early game and the rest of your cards can be inked. So you look for early game, you look for maybe some late game you want to keep, and if you do want to keep some of that late game, are the rest of your cards inkable, and are those late game cards inkable, able to be put in your inkwell as resources? Because if they are, say you want, that's why I mentioned the 9-drop Maleficent, you might want to keep that card, because worst case scenario, you just put it in your inkwell and you're fine. But like if you're playing that same deck, you probably don't want to keep the 8-drop Elsa, because it's not able to be inked. So if you say draw another one and you draw a magic mirror that can't be inked, and you're all of a sudden you're on turn 4 and you're really struggling for cards to put in your inkwell, you don't want that. So you're very, very rarely going to keep a late game card in your opening hand that can't be used as ink. And I would think about, like in the Ruby Amethyst Control deck that I run, I only run 2 copies of the Queen, and it's able to be inked, and it's a late game card. But since I only run 2 copies, I really hate using it for ink, so I'm probably going to put that back and just hope to draw it later. So, but like I said, I run 4 copies of the Maleficent Dragon, the 9-drop, and that one I don't feel so bad about putting in my inkwell, because there's 3 more copies in the deck that I can draw. So yeah, so that's kind of how I think about it. I kind of keep this short and sweet, but just like think about it this way: when you see your first 7 cards, your first step is, what's my early game look like? Do I have that unlocked? You can even put those to the side, your 1, 2s, and 3s, and if you got a good chunk of them, then you can kind of do what you want with the rest of your hand. But most likely you're going to put back, if you really want to, just the simplest way, you can put back any uninkable cards because you need ink to play the game. So you can put back any uninkable cards and redraw those, and put back any cards generally that are super high cost, because you're going to hope to draw those later in the game. But like I said, you can think about as it goes, and it depends on the deck you're playing. So this is just kind of a general guide, and I used that Ruby Amethyst control because that's just the one I'm familiar with a little bit for examples in this video. But going forward, I'll include a section in the deck text that I put out to kind of go over a little bit of the nuance of whichever deck I'm talking about in that video in regards to mulliganing. Because like if you want, for example, if you're playing the 1-drop Lilo that quests for 2 and Simba, that's a crazy start to a game. So you're going to mulligan aggressively to get those cards. You might have an early game, but with that deck, sometimes I'll say I just have a Lilo, I'll throw everything else back just to hope to draw the Simba, because that's such a good combo in the early game that you're going to mulligan aggressively to get that. But in a deck like Ruby Amethyst control, a lot of it's redundant. A lot of the things do the same thing. That's what makes that deck good, is that a lot of your early game cards are all just fighting for the board. They're very similar. And your late game cards are your bombs, but they're still similar. Like the 8-drop Elsa and the 9-drop Maleficent are very similar cards. I mean, they're definitely different, but they're both big bombs that you throw down when you play them, and they have a big effect. And they kind of take over the game from there if you make it to that point in the game. All that to say, it's not so specific, so you're not mulliganing as hard for specific cards. A lot of them do the same thing. You might want one copy of your Be Prepared, but it's still such a late game card. You're not really thinking about that in the mulligan phase. But so some things to think about when it comes to a deck specifically is like, are you a deck that has, like, when you did your deck building, that I'm running really high on uninkable cards, so I need to aggressively throw those back. I'm no way going to keep those because I got too high of a chance to keep drawing them. Like the deck you're playing, maybe whatever, you know what I mean? If your deck is high on uninkables, you're really looking for cards to use as ink in your mulligan phase. That's your good chance to kind of throw those back. But I didn't want to keep this too long, so thank you for watching. Second video on the channel, so thank you. Please subscribe, like the video, leave a comment if you have any specific thoughts on mulliganing as regards to Lorcana specifically, because it's definitely, like I said, different than other TCGs, not in just the fact of how, the actual rules of the mulligan phase, but in the way you think about cards, because every card can be used, well, not every card can be used as resource, but you kind of know what I mean. Cards can both be used as resources or played as the characters or actions that they are. So like I said, thank you for watching, and I'll be back soon with some more videos on the channel. But thank you again for watching.